So, you've watched some of the countless videos telling you that fighting games are cool, hopefully mine, and at least one of them convinced you to give the genre a fair chance despite some of its quirks. You picked a game that seems to tick your boxes, you found a character that you like the look of, and after trying the single player modes, you decide it's time to try playing against other humans. Whether you got smoked by your friends or looking to level up before queuing up online, you want to learn, but you don't really know where to start. When I started this channel, I promised to make a tutorial series, so here it begins, your first guide to fighting games. This is episode 0 out of many, but before we start, I need to put up some disclaimers and caveats to manage expectations and avoid wasting your time. I'll try to make it quick. Feel free to skip to the next chapter if you're in a rush, but please make sure to have watched this before commenting. 1. The target audience for this video series is people who are new to fighting games and have already decided they want to make an honest attempt to learn them. If you are already a fighting game player looking to get better, this series is not for you, but you might still learn something from it. If you are still on the fence about getting into fighting games, this series is not for you, and you should probably check out my video essays first. By extension, this is not the place where we bitch about mechanics we don't like. I'll leave that for another type of video. 2. This series is not a one-stop shop for all your learning needs. It's called First Guide, not Definitive Guide. Because I'm trying to be game agnostic, I'm inevitably going to gloss over some systems and concepts that are unique to the specific subgenre or game you are trying to learn. I'll be focusing on 2D and 3D fighters, but most of what I will say will also apply to platform fighters. It should be enough to get you started, but eventually you will have to do your own research. On that note, 3. Everything I'll tell you is a lie. As I mentioned in a previous video, in fighting games, things are true until they aren't. I'll do my best to stick to elements that are somewhat universal and point out when I know they aren't, but there's always going to be a character that challenges common knowledge, exceptions to the rules, or a matchup where things don't quite work the usual way. Because of that, 4. This series is not a step-by-step recipe for success in every match. You will not find any flowcharts here. No amount of watching these videos will be a replacement for putting the time in actually playing the game, and yes, losing matches in the process. But the goal is to get you to a place where you'll be able to practice more effectively and have fun doing so. 5. FGC jargon is unavoidable. I'll do my best to introduce new terminology gradually and explain it in a layperson's terms, but ultimately it does make conversation simpler, so better start getting used to it now. If I ever forget to define a term, be sure to check out Infield's glossary, which is the reference I'll be using throughout the series. And finally, 6. This is my own take on teaching. Because of the target audience, and since I'm known for having an unusual perspective on things, these tutorials might look different from what you expect, and if you disagree with the way I present things, that's okay. I'm offering one way to learn fighting games, not the way. Besides, I'm still learning myself, so I might make mistakes. Check the description after watching for any corrections I might have had to make after publishing. On that note, for any veterans who would like to chime in the comments, your input will be very welcome, but please keep in mind 2 things before commenting. You want complete beginners to understand what you're saying, so assume nothing is common knowledge to them, especially terminology, unless it's been explained in a previous video. Either way, please speak with kindness if you want them to become your future sparring partners. And although it is entirely possible I forget something important, if I omit a special case or exceptions to a rule, or oversimplify some concepts at the beginning, it's almost certainly on purpose for the sake of keeping things simple for now, so please trust I will expand on it some other time. Okay, with all that clarified, we can get onto the main course. The learning journey in fighting games starts by getting into the right mindset. And in my opinion, this means understanding a number of high-level concepts that will serve you as guiding principles. Characters wailing on each other does not a fighting game make. From a game design standpoint, a key difference between fighting games and beat-em-up or action-adventure games is the importance of defense. I've heard people be like, this is supposed to be a fighting game, not a blocking game, but anyone who says that doesn't seem to understand that actively trying not to get hurt is kind of a big component of fighting. I mean, in any martial art, the default stance, your guard, is usually meant to make it easier for you to defend yourself. And one of the most famous callouts to start a 1v1 fight, en garde, literally translates to ordering your opponent to put themselves in a defensive stance. Even if there was no connection to real fighting, this should be a convincing example. When players discuss moves in fighting games, the property that people tend to care about the most is not how much damage it does or how much reach it has, but how quickly you recover from your attack being blocked by your opponent. More on that in a bit. If for some reason you are allergic to the idea of spending a significant amount of time defending yourself, you might need to revise your expectations of how far you'll get into this genre. Note that I say defend and not block, because blocking is not the only way of defending yourself, but that's the topic of an upcoming episode. Responsiveness is very important to gamers, and rightly so. You want the character you're controlling to feel like an extension of your body, and your intentions to be transmitted to the game world as quickly as possible. But anyone who's worked on a game that includes character animation will tell you that there is a recurring tug-of-war between designers and animators over which is more important between responsive controls and good-looking animation. Usually, it's the former group who wins, but with fighting games we have to make a compromise. Because having every attack be instant would not only make everything unreadable, but it would also look like playing on a garbage internet connection. And so, in fighting games, everything takes time. And I'm not talking about input, display, or network latency, but the character actions themselves. Whether it's attacking, jumping, throwing, transitioning from running to blocking, or many other kinds of actions, almost none of them are instantaneous. This is kind of obvious when you think about it, but it seems that many newish players forget about it. I've lost count of the number of times I failed to kick an opponent out of the sky because I forgot it takes some time for the attack animation to get in the right pose. Let's go back to the real world for a bit. Like a good story, an attack has a beginning, a middle, and an end. First, we have the motion required to transition from my starting stance to the point where I can start dealing damage. In fighting game parlance, this period is called the startup. Then we have the section during which the attack is able to do damage. This period is called the active part of the attack. And finally, we have the time it takes to come back to a point where I can do the same attack again. This is called the recovery period, during which my current attack can no longer do damage. Likewise, if you get punched in the face in the real world, it will take you some time greater than 0 before you can counterattack, because you're busy recovering from how that hit stunned you, a period you might call hit stun. By the same token, it takes time to recover from blocking an incoming attack if that broke your stance. And in fighting games, this is represented by block stun. In the vast majority of situations, the game will stop paying attention to your button presses during those recovery periods. This is why mindless button mashing gets you killed, because you are committing your character to a state in which they are going to be unresponsive for a while, preventing you from doing the right thing at the right time, even if you had the fastest reaction times on the planet. Because those recovery, hit stun, and block stun times are all different, the player with the smallest recovery time will get to initiate the next interaction first. This is what people refer to as the frame advantage of an interaction, a frame being a unit of time, the length of which isn't that important. And no, knowing exactly how much advantage you have is not something you absolutely need to memorize right now or ever, because there are many situations in which those values can change. I'll go into more detail some other time. The important takeaway for now is that at the end of an interaction, one player usually gets to press buttons before the other one can. This is why some people will tell you that fighting games are actually turn-based. However, since different actions have different startup times, being the first to press a button doesn't mean your move will come out first. It won't do you any good to come out of an interaction with the advantage if what you follow up with is your slowest attack. I realized I've introduced quite a few terms in one go, because I'm going to reuse those quite a bit from now on, but it really boils down to one thing. Pressing a button means committing to an action for a certain amount of time, at the end of which your opponent may or may not be able to act faster than you, and vice versa. Because every action takes time, you have to anticipate what state the game will be in by the time your move becomes active, and your opponent has to do the same. I still get caught by this, as I sometimes try to block the attack I just got hit by instead of the one that's coming next. Effectively, this means that, execution aside, playing a fighting game boils down to doing two things: predict the future as accurately as possible, and make it hard for your opponent to do the same. I know, this is true of every competitive game where there is interaction between the players, even turn-based ones. But the pace of fighting games, combined with the cost of losing an interaction, make it an especially important aspect of the genre. To make your predictions easier, you have many options, such as knowing what your opponent's possible and preferred actions are, so that you don't need to worry about what's unlikely to happen, putting them in a situation where the number of these actions is greatly reduced, for instance by knocking them down or backing them into a corner, or by tricking them into acting in a specific way that you know how to counter. To make your opponent's predictions harder, the main way is to be less, predictable. You can do this by varying your approach, changing the timing of your attacks, and or using ambiguous attacks, forcing your opponent to guess what is the correct response out of a limited number of options. The latter is called a mix-up, and while every character is able to do this to some extent, some characters are specifically designed around this concept, at the cost of some overflow, usually. Each of these methods deserves its own video, so we'll leave it at that for now. The takeaway is that if all you ever do is react to your opponent's moves, you are already dead. But if you are anticipating, well, now you have a chance to call the shots. In any game, in any genre, where objects collide with one another, the actual physical shape of those objects is an approximation of what the player can see. This is done for a number of reasons, such as performance and game balance. In fighting games, the collisions we care about most are approximated by two things. The hurt box, as the name suggests, is where your character can get hurt if hit by something that can cause damage. The hitbox, on the other hand, represents which part of an attack can cause damage if it intersects with the opponent's hurt box. Hitboxes only appear for a fraction of an attack's duration, and their presence is what defines the active part of an attack. There are other types of boxes, but we don't need to worry about those for now. And sometimes they're not boxes at all, but we still refer to the collection of them as the hit and hurt boxes. As I mentioned, this concept of damaging collisions in one form or another is basically universal to video game development. So why do I feel the need to tell you about this? That's because, for the sake of the game balance and the sanity of the animation team, fighting game developers have absolutely no issues with tinkering with those boxes to the point where it sometimes doesn't really match the animation anymore. I mean, more often than not, it's close enough, but there are situations where it will be significantly different. What you need to understand is that it's very unlikely to be a bug. If you see your attack pass through a character without dealing any damage, it means that there was either no hitbox or no hurtbox at that location. This is not the game being broken, this is the game telling you your move doesn't beat theirs. For instance, an attack that is meant to be upper body invulnerable might have the character's hurtbox stop at their waist, or even their knees, and by extension, a move that is fully invulnerable will have no hurtbox at all. Some games have more strict rules, such as in many 3D fighters, high attacks will meet crouching opponents no matter the relative size of the characters. Does that mean you need to memorize all the hitboxes and hurtboxes of every move of every character? Of course not. A balance patch might invalidate that knowledge anyway. If your attack doesn't connect, try again from a different distance, or try a different attack. Another big element that fits in this category of what you see isn't what you get is the fact that the health bar is a lie. First of all, and this might sound obvious, but to be honest, I never realized it until I properly got into the genre, different characters can have different amounts of health. But with some rare exceptions, you wouldn't know that just by looking at the health bar. Likewise, the bar might not display health linearly, meaning that an attack that does, say, 50 damage will remove a bigger chunk of the health bar if it's at 100% than if it's at 10%. And of course, because these are percentages, the same attack will remove a bigger chunk of the health bar on a low health character than on a high health character. There are also a number of mechanics that change the amount of damage a character actually takes, especially as they're low on health, although that's not important right now. This isn't the developers trying to be mean to you by giving you more things to memorize. You won't be able to. I'd say the point is the opposite, making you realize that you shouldn't worry about this stuff too much. As long as you're not dead, just keep fighting. As an anecdote, I once accidentally found myself playing ranked without the HUD in Street Fighter V and realized that at the level I'm at, I have bigger problems than paying attention to mine or my opponent's health. This is another one that might sound obvious, but is worth spelling out. Different characters are designed to have different strengths and weaknesses, which means that they are meant to be played in a certain way. This is how you get character archetypes like Zoner, Grappler, or Rushdown. But at the same time, as a person, you likely have your own preferences on how to fight an opponent. And if the character you like the look of is not very good at playing the way you like to fight, you're going to struggle. It's a bit like trying to cut a steak with a spoon. Not impossible, but difficult. At this point, you have two options. Pick a different character that suits your playstyle better, or play the character as intended. But if you're watching this video series, chances are you don't really know what fighting style you like yet, so I'd recommend sticking with the characters that appeals to you and learn their ways. You can always switch to a new main character later. What you will learn here will transfer across. But it's also worth mentioning that some characters are more difficult to get good with than others, so you might want to take that into account when picking a main. When in doubt, the character on the game's cover should be a safe pick. And yes, some characters are stronger than others, but even a broken character can't carry you if you don't know the basics. And there are many stories of people doing well in tournaments with low tier characters, so don't worry about it for now and just pick whoever you want. Last but not least, the point I see coming back over and over in people's comments is the impression that you need to have all the answers before the match even starts, or you will lose for sure. What I'm hearing is that people are afraid of making mistakes. I'm going to get a bit philosophical for a moment. Most of us live in a society whose tolerance to mistakes is getting lower and lower, and who wants you to believe that making a mistake permanently reduces your value as a person, something you may or may not have internalized. First of all, fuck that noise. You are human, I'm guessing, so you will screw up from time to time. But even if making mistakes was bad in and of itself, which it isn't, let's remember that here we're just talking about a video game. Chill. It's not the end of the world if you get things wrong and lose a game, or 10. My point is that, by definition, skill-based matchmaking assigns a value or a status to you, and losing either of those is something we've been trained to dislike, especially if it's because of our own mistakes, which leads to ladder anxiety. But you need to understand that making mistakes from time to time is the cost of doing business in this genre. For a fight to actually begin, someone's got to leave an opening, react a bit late, or misread the situation. And sometimes that someone is gonna be you. And that's okay. It doesn't make you a bad player. We all start somewhere. Even pro players drop combos or get caught flat-footed by a character they don't have as much experience fighting against. Every time you see a move for the first time, you are probably going to lose that interaction. It happens to everyone. What matters is how you react. You can blame the opponent for using a cheap technique over and over again, and maybe they did use a move that could use a nerf. But you being salty about it is on you, not on them. I repeat, do not blame your frustration on the other player when they're offering you predictability on a silver platter. It doesn't help that, by definition, fighting games are about putting two people in a conflict, and people are bad at dealing with conflict, like real bad. But in the 8 months I've been playing fighting games, I've realized that those moments where you clutch a win with a shred of life left happen way more often than you think, but they cannot happen if you admit defeat early, or worse, rage quit. Don't get me wrong, I know it can be hard to shake the salt. I get frustrated too sometimes, but I keep playing, because the thing about mistakes is that while you may not be able to repair them, whether you learn from them is up to you. Most modern fighting games gives you the tools to do so. If you can understand and get on board with the high-level concepts we've gone over, I'm confident that you will be much better prepared to start learning how to really play the genre, as we'll start moving on to more concrete topics. So do the thing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.